What's up, people? This is Grammatics TV. I want to talk about Arsenal today. Arsenal Football Club and Arsenal's current title challenge in the 25-26 season. And I want to speak on how, they've been performing. But most importantly, talk about if Arsenal don't win the league, there has to be some tough questions to be asked. It'll be interesting to find out what people think about Arsenal in terms of how they're performing and what their sort of, prospects are for winning the league this season. They're currently doing what they're doing, which is, maintaining, the challenges that they're having from City and also Aston Villa, actually, surprisingly. But I want to go back and talk about when Arsenal first obviously had their title challenge in 22-23 season. So if Arsenal basically don't win the league, I think this season now, it has to get to a point where questions have to be asked in ways where a lot of fans may feel it being tough questions, but at the same time, questions need to be asked of where the club are looking to go on the pitch. They're doing well business-wise and, financially, but where they're looking to go on the pitch and what ambitions do they have if they don't win the league or any major trophy, Premier League, Champions League. Now, 2022-23 season was the season that they unexpectedly made a title challenge. They made a challenge when nobody expected it. They made it, and they made it interesting. Now, Arsenal were playing initially in that season a free-flowing sort of football. Quick moves. They can make quick breaks. A lot of the time, they built heavily on the right, and they quite do that, a lot today. They're quite very right side heavy in how they build. You look at the games where they blitz teams a lot of the times. I remember the Liverpool game at the Emirates. You look at the way they could just move the ball with consummate ease. They can move it through the middle to the right, cut back. It can move to the left, and it can just move so quickly, quicker, sort of on the break sort of football. They could keep the ball, conserve it, move it around, but at the blink of an eye, they can get the ball moving and have a cutback and have a goal. That's how they were. They were quite fast in the way they played a lot of the time. But you saw in that season, it wasn't enough to win a league because at times you saw games where they would act as if it was basketball. A lot of the times that door at the back was go open too much. They didn't have a good balance enough. It was more of, look, we are a team that season and we're just going to go forward and do what we do and play in the ways that, the manager wanted, which was more of an attacking side of things. That's when the inversion of Zinchenko happened in that season. That's when Jesus was obviously signed and he had that free-flowing style. Linking up play well, linking with the wingers, linking with the 8 and the 10. And you saw that kind of ways that they brought in wingers. But in the end, it wasn't enough. They had, like I said, moments where their games were a little bit end-to-end. I remember the Southampton game at the Emirates, threw that away, right? Ended up 3-3. I remember so many other games where they were doing what they had to do, but they threw it away. Now, they had a serious injury to one of their best centre-backs in the season at that time, which was William Saliba. So that was something that derailed their chances because at the end of the day, they were new to a title challenge, never been in one for a number of years. And when they had that major injury to Saliba, they had Rob Holding. And if you know Rob Holding as a footballer, he wasn't close to even William Saliba or even any of the other players that Arsenal had at that time. So you've got to look at that season and say, okay, Arteta, he was in the job only for a couple of years up to that point, and he done well to even have a challenge that nobody expected. But people may say, oh, but he had the challenge, so he should still get over the line. I hear that argument, but at the same time, when you've not had any experience, and most importantly, when you don't have players of a certain level coming in to replace players who are injured, you're going to have a fall off or a drop off. That is 100% facts. You've seen that if you study other teams, you've seen certain times when certain players leave their, team, they're not the same. So that one, I look at Arsenal and I thought, okay, that season goes by, finished second, exceeded expectations, you can take that, right? 23-24 was the season where I saw a major change in the way they play. They became more controlled. They had more of a balance defensively and offensively. But there were issues offensively because that was the season when Arsenal signed Kai Havertz. He was signed for the 8 position. It didn't really look as fluent as it should have because when Xhaka was in that team the season prior, you saw what he did in his last season. When he came in, Kai Havertz, it took him a while to get going. Divided opinion. He didn't look as fluent. His touch and moves wasn't as fluent. It wasn't looking like how Arsenal were accustomed to when it comes to certain players they buy. They had players generally in Arsenal's team that could move the ball in a certain way, But he moved up front eventually, and as they say, the rest is history. We now know that Kai Havertz plays up front for Arsenal. But yes, he was a player that came in. It didn't work out in that position, and he moved up front. But that season, Arsenal were more controlled. They were still building heavy from the wings, but there was more of a patient approach, methodical, closer relationships in the passes to each player. And at times, there were issues even with their attack. And then obviously, I remember, if you remember, when they went on a run, at the turn of the year of the, 23-24 season, they went on a run. They went and won so many games. I think they probably only lost about a couple that year when they went from January all the way to May. And then obviously they lost the league to Man City by 2 points. But that was a season where you thought, if you were looking at the team, okay, they learned from the season prior. They now should be able to hopefully get over the line. But they were still facing a juggernaut in Man City, and we know what Pep Guardiola is. And we know the players that they had at that time still in 23-24 season. World-class players. Again, another season goes by in 23-24 because they pushed Man City, like I said, with only losing out by 2 points. They pushed them. That season, you saw a change, like I said, in their style of play. Measured, methodical, defensively minded. Didn't go too gung-ho in games like the previous year. So you saw Arteta saw something and thought, okay, this is the way I think we can try and win a league going forward. More measured, more conservative. Divided opinion at times because there was moments in the season, like I say, that they had struggles with the attacks. And then obviously from that January onwards to May, they went on a run. But they fell short. People, chalked it up as, okay, Man City are still the team, still the best team. Arsenal are still learning. Some people said, obviously, they should have still won it. They threw the game away. If you remember Aston Villa at home, Ollie Watkins threw on goal. You know what the damage he did to Arsenal at that time. And on top of that, the chances that were missed in that game as well. So, but okay, you can chalk that one up and say, they've managed to push Man City well. Okay, they didn't win the league. They didn't win any other trophy either. But you go to the 24-25 season now. That one, I chalk it up to injury crisis. Again, I'm not completely basing it on that, but there were injuries to a point where you could not compete properly because Arsenal did not have players to replace certain level of players like Saka at the time, like the forward line. When Arsenal had players like Kai Havertz injured during that season for 3 months, Saka again for 3 months, Jesus came in for a bit. He got injured that season as well. It got to a point where you were just literally dealing with what you could deal with, for example, if you remember Partey at right back in certain games, the game at Aston Villa at Emirates, 2-0 up, threw it away 2-2. You saw certain moments where they were just not dealing with things as good as they could based on the injuries. So you chalk that season up as well to, you know what? Maybe they have injuries in that season. Maybe that was the thing that derailed their challenge. But a lot of people could say those are excuses. Oh, you've been now challenging for 3 years in a row and you're now going to throw up another excuse? Well, that's down to interpretation. That's down to what people think about that season. But for me, I would put it down to lack of game management as well as injuries. So it's an onus on the players and the manager to not manage certain games. Like I said, they threw certain games away when they were leading. And then on top of that, an injury sort of crisis. So that one, you can probably give that to them as well. Now, you go to the 25-26 season, this season, leading the league. They've been leading it for majority of the season. They've been playing football that gets you over the line, right? Initially, in the early parts of the season, they were looking, to me, a little bit more free-flowing at times. There's been an issue, obviously, up front with Victor Gyökeres in terms of his adaptability. Doesn't look as fluent of a striker that's required in this league, and particularly in this Arsenal team that like to play outside to go in. So like their foot was dropping, passing it off, holding it, feinting, doing things that bring other players in. That's a Jesus, for example. But that's where Victor Gyökeres is currently playing. And he is, again, divided opinion. He's not really showing enough, in my opinion, certain types of movement, that kind of on your toes sort of way of moving, which at times can affect the team. And then at certain times, he's also showing movements where, okay, he looks decent. So it's like the inconsistency of him and him not being as, easy on the eyes, as well as his touch. His little things are not really coming off for him, put it this way. And if you see the games, you'll notice it. But Arteta, now in this season, his style is still in that measured, conservative way. But there's still questions at times over the attack. The fluency, the dynamic nature of it. Is it dynamic enough? Is it going through different areas of the pitch enough? Through the middle, over the top quicker? Is the passes through the lines quicker? These are all questions that you look at and you think, okay, they're still playing well in terms of getting results. But if they don't win the league in this season, questions need to now be asked, I think, based on the fact that they've had the time from 22-23 season to learn the process of winning a league and what it takes. And now their style that has been changed. It's understandable why he changed it. Like I said, from 22-23 season, a bit like basketball, moved to a more conservative approach, defensively more sound, and they're one of the best, obviously, the defensive teams in the league. So we understand that part. But this season, if they don't win the league, barring an injury crisis where majority of their front line are out, as well as their back line, for example, which they're kind of having issues with their back line. But let's just say they have an injury crisis where majority of the back line and front line are out. You can probably give it a pass. But if that's not the case and certain players start coming back, which they will be coming back in the team to make the team obviously, more consistent, hopefully, for them, what questions can be asked now of Arteta as to why he, might not get over the line this time? And if they don't win it, what is the next step? Is there another manager? Is it waiting for him to maybe come up with another style conducive for the team? Is it more investment in certain individuals that you now need to get to a world-class level of player? Do you need a different style of individual, brilliance type of player? Arsenal seem to have signed one in Eze. They seem to have one in Wanyeri. They seem to have one, even if you want to go as far as Max Dowman, although he's still a kid. But those individual players, how are they playing in the team that will be conducive for them to show their flair and show the ability that they have to get other players involved in the team so Arsenal can try and win the league? Are they doing enough sometimes with their flair players under Arteta to win the league or to win games a bit more seamlessly? Do Arsenal have to sometimes pass a bit too much before they score? Does Saka sometimes have to fight on the right wing, beat 2 guys or 3 guys to be able to get a crossing? Is that what he's doing a bit too much of? Comparing to other wingers, for example, how Arsenal play. And think to yourself, if you look at the way Man City play, do you see that kind of struggle that they have to do like what Arsenal do? Because I kind of see that. I see Foden having the ability to play in the pockets comfortably. I see Odegaard having to do a lot of closing down and pressing, which is an Arsenal thing. But I don't see the ability for certain flair players to allow to be as open as they could. The only person I see that is with Saka. Now, the left side, and this is me not saying something about the manager in terms of, I don't know if Arteta is completely saying don't do certain things. He may be. But if Saka is that free on the right, and if you've seen certain games of Martinelli this season, he at times has been free. He's been free to take on his man. But the frequency and the ability for Arsenal to do that regularly and to show the flair from the flair players regularly, is that something that we're seeing enough of? Are we seeing enough of give me the ball from the back four, pass it through to the midfield to Azubamendi, for example, and pass it through the lines quicker? Or are we seeing a more methodical approach consistently throughout the team, which to me, I think I see, which can make it harder to score goals and make things easier for even the forward line? Because I think forward line need the ball quicker. A Gyökeres needs the ball over the top, through the lines, cutbacks. But he needs to get in front of his man a lot as well. So these are things that I'm seeing in the team that are through discrepancies that Arteta needs to look at. And if they're not looked at throughout the season and they don't get over the line, do we now look at another manager? Do Arsenal look at another manager if they do not get over the line? Do they say, okay, this is the investment we've had over the last couple of years. We should be doing X, Y, and Z. So you've got to question what is more important. Obviously, making money for the club is important. And that's exactly what I'm sure is happening. You know, you can see some of the financial records and what they've done over the years, right? But what is the goal for Arsenal if they don't win the league this season? And what is important for them? Do they see that they look at this team and say, it's good enough on paper? Or are they just going to say it's good enough, but we're just going to persevere with Arteta and maybe just go for another season and see what he does, because his contract is going to be coming up anyway? What is the mentality that Arsenal are going to show if they don't win the league? Do Arsenal persevere with Arteta and say, in fact, he's the guy because he will change the team again with new additions, maybe with a newer style of play? Because at the moment, they're doing what they're doing, they're maintaining. But to be able to get over the line, the fine margins are required. And I've seen the best teams over the years from watching football. They are a little bit more straightforward in their approach to score goals, a bit more direct, a bit more quicker in the final third. Two-touch stuff starts happening, not the constant passing and passing. So what is Arteta going to do differently in the important games getting to the latter part of the season? Because they will be in the title race to that point. It's just, are Arsenal, as Arteta, going to hold his nerve? Are the players going to hold their nerve? And are the players going to be allowed more so to show their freedom to do what they need to do on the pitch? Because if they don't win the league, and it's not just this league, is if they don't win a major trophy, questions need to be asked about, do Arsenal need a new manager? Because if they want to move forward as a club on the pitch, you always have to question each year what the club are doing. You know, you always have to question where your manager is. You always have to question where the players are. You always have to question what players you have and say, he's not the one anymore. Do Arsenal hold on to players too long? The acquisitions will now be questioned of the players that were signed in the summer. Some players divided opinion in the summer of who were signed. You know, certain players who are not playing enough games this season, should we question as to why maybe Awanieri is not playing enough? That's not to say he is the guy to, you know, get Arsenal to the finishing line. But certain flair players who have those little abilities to play in the pockets and fizz balls in and touch and turns, little slick stuff that are required individually to win games a lot of the time. Because a lot of times, yes, you're going to have obviously teams probing and passing, but you need that sometimes individual brilliance. You know, has he acclimatized Eze quick enough? Has Eze acclimatized to the club on the pitch quick enough himself? You know, you see him initiating things, and I believe Eze is the guy along with other players, to do something that I think can win Arsenal the league. But what are we seeing, or what is Arsenal, fans or whatever, seeing that is showing that, look, they're going to win the league and they're going to get over the line when it matters? So you've got to question all these things: how they're playing, the frequency of how they allow their flair players to express themselves, the speed or the lack of speed of sometimes the passing required at the edge of the box or in the box, the first touch, the shooting accurately. These are all things Arteta works on with his players. If they're not improving and they don't win the league, who do we look at? We look at the manager. But it will be interesting to find out what people think, because this is a season where I think for the league, I just find it very important for Arsenal to try and win it, because of the fact that they've been in it for so many years now, the 4th season in a row. So you should be able to now learn from the mistakes, know how to manage games better, know what's important for each individual player and how they can best maximize their ability. Because if not, it's going to be a lot of questions by the end of the season. It just depends on how the club see them on the pitch. Because what's more important, the club winning on the pitch, or an allegiance with a manager because of where the manager took them? Like the video and let's get a conversation going. What's your opinion on Arsenal not winning the league? What should happen and what questions should be asked?